The ocean inspires awe, but beneath its shimmering surface lurks a silent ancient predator. In this video, we explore 6 harrowing shark encounters, from a peaceful swim in Florida that turned bloody to a brutal ambush in the mangroves of Mozambique, and from drifting divers to lone swimmers stalked in open water. Whether accidental brushes or life-altering bites, these true stories show how quickly calm seas can erupt into chaos. On the morning of February 14, 2022, Emma Lister, a 33-year-old marine biology enthusiast from Adelaide, was hiking along a remote stretch of the South Australian coastline near Coffin Bay. She was alone, seeking solitude and the peaceful rhythm of the waves to escape a week of office stress. A quiet person with a fascination for the ocean, she often wandered far from the beaten paths, drawn to tide pools and washed-up mysteries. That morning, the beach was deserted, the tide low and the breeze strong enough to scatter seashells along the sand. As she walked, her boots crunching over bits of shell and dried kelp, her eyes caught an unnatural shape about 50 meters ahead. A massive form lay partially buried near the water's edge, surrounded by gulls and the churning foam of the retreating tide. When she approached, she realized with a jolt that it was a shark, no ordinary one, but a great white, perhaps over 4 meters long. It lay on its side, jaw partially open, gills barely moving. Its back was covered in patches of sand and tangled kelp. Its pale underbelly shimmered dully in the cloud-filtered sun. Emma's heart raced with a mix of awe and concern. She had never seen a great white this close, not even during a research internship years ago. The shark looked lifeless at first, and its stillness lulled her into thinking it was already gone. She stepped closer, cautiously circling the animal. The skin around its snout and mouth showed signs of abrasions, likely from thrashing against rocks. Its eye, half closed and dull, seemed vacant. Driven by a mix of curiosity and a need to confirm whether it was truly dead, Emma knelt near the shark's flank and reached out. Her fingers brushed against its rough, sandpaper-like skin just behind the gill slit. The texture surprised her, thick, grainy, and warm from the sun. In less than a second, everything changed. The shark's head whipped sideways with terrifying speed. There was no warning, no growl, no twitch to suggest what was coming. Its massive jaws opened and closed with mechanical force. Emma didn't have time to pull her hand away. She felt a sudden deep pressure followed by a tearing sensation that split her world into pain and horror. Her forearm, from elbow to wrist, was caught in the corner of the creature's mouth, its serrated teeth carving through skin, muscle, and into bone. She yanked back instinctively, stumbling backward and screaming as blood sprayed in an arc across the sand. The wound was catastrophic, deep, jagged, and pulsing blood. Her eyes blurred, and she collapsed to her knees, trying to cradle the mutilated arm. The agony made her breath hitch, her ears ring. About 30 meters up the beach, a couple walking their dog had already noticed the shark. When they heard Emma's scream, they sprinted toward her. The man, a retired paramedic named Craig, dropped to her side and immediately used his shirt to wrap a makeshift tourniquet around her upper arm, twisting it with a stick he'd found nearby. The bleeding slowed, but the damage was already severe. The shark thrashed again. Sand exploded around its body as its tail slapped down hard enough to leave a deep imprint. One of its pectoral fins flexed violently, lifting part of its bulk off the ground. It didn't try to move toward them, but the power it still had was terrifying. The couple backed away quickly, dragging Emma farther up the beach, careful not to jostle her injured arm. Emma drifted in and out of consciousness, her body shaking from shock and blood loss. Her vision faded to black at the edges, and the cold wind chilled her sweat-drenched skin. The woman called emergency services while trying to shield Emma's body from the wind. The ambulance arrived in under 15 minutes, its tires carving trenches into the soft, sandy beach. Paramedics loaded Emma into the back of the ambulance and rushed her to a hospital in Port Lincoln. She was stabilized, but the surgeons had a difficult job ahead. The shark's teeth had destroyed several tendons, shredded key nerves, and cracked the radius bone in 2 places. The surgical team worked for hours to save her arm. They succeeded in preventing amputation, but Emma would never regain full function in her hand again. Wildlife officers arrived shortly after Emma was evacuated. The shark was still alive, but disoriented and critically injured. They believed it had suffered internal trauma, possibly from a fight with another predator or being struck by a boat propeller. The combination of confusion, injury, and exposure likely led to its stranding on the beach. Although severely weakened, it retained enough strength to defend itself when touched, a reflex action deeply ingrained by millions of years of evolution. A decision was made to euthanize the animal humanely after attempts to refloat it failed. It had suffered too much internal damage to survive. Samples were collected for the study, and the carcass was removed the next day. Emma was released from the hospital after a month. Physical therapy became part of her daily life. Her fingers curled unnaturally, and her grip was weak. Writing, typing, even brushing her hair brought pain and frustration. The emotional damage ran just as deep. She avoided beaches for months, plagued by flashbacks and the echo of her scream in the back of her mind. Friends said she was quieter than before, withdrawn. But over time she began sharing the story, not to warn others against curiosity, but to remind them that even dying giants can still strike. She often thought about the shark. It hadn't hunted her, hadn't stalked her like in the movies. It had reacted the only way it knew how. And in that moment, both the human and the predator had been victims of confusion and the survival instinct. Emma never blamed the shark, but she never forgot the feeling of its skin, the sudden power behind its jaws, or the blood pooling on warm sand as gulls screamed overhead. In the end, the encounter left her scarred in body and mind, a painful reminder that even on the edge of death, nature's most dangerous creatures are never truly harmless. On July 10, 2018, two lifelong friends, Nate McAllister and Jordan Ruiz, both 42 years old and certified technical divers with hundreds of logged dives between them, dropped into the warm Pacific waters off the south shore of Oahu, Hawaii. They were experienced, cautious, and well-prepared, having planned a deep wreck dive to explore the USS Waipahu, a sunken World War II transport ship resting at 95 feet beneath the surface, long overtaken by coral and sea life. The morning had started smoothly. Clear skies, calm water, and a visibility range of nearly 100 feet, ideal for a wreck dive. Nate, a marine photographer from Seattle, carried a waterproof camera and a powerful torch to explore the tight corners of the ship. Jordan, who had served 8 years as a Navy rescue diver, now ran a private dive guide business in Honolulu. They'd done this dive together many times, drawn by the haunting beauty of the wreck and the schools of fish that danced around its broken hull. The descent was uneventful. Schools of goatfish and wrasses drifted by lazily as the men glided down toward the rusted bones of the ship. They followed the outline of the sunken vessel, moving through open cargo holds and past collapsed sections where beams jutted like skeletal ribs into the blue. The torchlight Nate carried cut through the water, illuminating crevices filled with coral polyps and darting cleaner shrimp. After 20 minutes of quiet exploration, they swam toward the ship's bow. That's when Jordan noticed something. A large shadow moved just above the sand beyond the wreck's edge, smooth and deliberate. He tapped Nate's arm and pointed. A tiger shark, perhaps 11 feet long, emerged from behind the broken hull. Its body glided with calm menace, broad head swinging slowly from side to side as it passed behind them. Initially, the shark exhibited no signs of aggression. It moved in wide, slow circles, curious but not confrontational. Both men stayed still, floating just above the wreck. Tiger sharks were common in Hawaiian waters, and experienced divers knew that calm behavior was usually enough to avoid provoking interest. But things changed fast. As the shark passed low along the starboard side, Nate turned slightly and instinctively shined his torch toward it. The concentrated beam swept across the sand, flashing over the shark's eye and gill slits. That moment triggered a switch. The tiger shark lunged upward with shocking speed, jaws opening wide. It collided with Nate's left side, clamping down just below the shoulder. The wetsuit shredded as rows of serrated teeth tore into muscle and tissue. Blood erupted in a thick cloud, swirling in the water like red smoke. Nate thrashed instinctively, eyes wide behind his mask. Pain surged through his body as the pressure of the bite nearly dislocated his shoulder. Jordan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Nate's buoyancy vest with both hands and kicked hard, trying to pull him upward, away from the shark. The shark didn't follow. It had struck once and then swam off, vanishing behind the silt stirred up from the seabed. Tiger sharks were known for sudden, opportunistic bites, and this one behaved no differently. It didn't linger or pursue, but the damage was done. Nate was bleeding heavily, his left arm slack and trembling. They couldn't risk a panic ascent, but Jordan wasted no time. He dumped some air from their vests to slow their rise, keeping one hand on Nate's gear, watching the cloud of blood slowly drift away as they ascended. Every few feet he scanned the water below, fearing the shark might return. But the ocean remained eerily quiet. Breaking the surface, Jordan waved furiously toward the dive boat anchored nearby. The crew, having seen the unusual ascent pattern and noticing the red stain trailing behind them, rushed into action. Two deckhands helped lift Nate onto the boat, where he collapsed, conscious but shaking, his face pale beneath his sunburnt skin. The bite had torn through layers of tissue, leaving 4 deep punctures and a jagged flap of muscle exposed. Blood soaked through towels as the crew applied pressure. Nate drifted in and out of awareness, overwhelmed by shock and pain. The Coast Guard was alerted, and within 20 minutes a rescue chopper arrived. Nate was airlifted to a medical center in Honolulu, where surgeons fought to save his arm. The shark's teeth had shredded part of the deltoid muscle and cut close to a major artery, but the swift response from Jordan and the boat crew had kept him alive. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital undergoing reconstructive surgery and physical therapy. He retained use of the arm but lost some strength and flexibility. Large, curved scars marked the entry and exit points of the bite, a permanent reminder of what happened below the surface that day. Marine biologists later reviewed footage from Nate's camera, which had continued recording even after the bite. They speculated that the sudden movement and high-intensity beam from the torch may have triggered the shark's strike reflex. In low-visibility environments, light and motion can resemble struggling prey. Tiger sharks are notorious for testing unfamiliar objects with their mouths. While not naturally aggressive toward humans, they are unpredictable and opportunistic, often mistaking non-food items for potential prey. In this case, experts concluded the bite was likely exploratory, not predatory. But exploratory or not, the damage was severe. For Jordan, the event left a deep emotional mark. Despite his military background and calm under pressure, he couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness as he watched his friend being bitten in an instant. He returned to guiding dives a month later, but he never led another wreck dive without 2 safety divers in the group. Nate eventually returned to the water, cautiously and only in shallow, clear conditions. His passion for marine life remained, but his relationship with the ocean had undergone a change. What was once a place of peace now carried a layer of fear. That day in July transformed a routine dive into a fight for survival. What began as a quiet journey into history ended in blood and trauma. Even in familiar waters, surrounded by beauty, danger can appear without sound or warning. On March 3, 2021, Liam Jarrett, a 29-year-old underwater technician from Perth, descended beneath the remote Centurion Alpha oil rig located over 80 kilometers off the northwest coast of Western Australia. Calm seas and a clear weather window made it the ideal day for routine maintenance on the rig's lower steel supports, structures submerged nearly 40 meters beneath the surface. Liam was no stranger to danger. He had been diving for over a decade, first with commercial fisheries, then as part of industrial offshore crews. He was strong, focused, and methodical, traits sharpened by years of technical dives in low-visibility waters where machinery, depth, and pressure left no room for error. That morning, Liam was tethered to a surface-supplied breathing system, carrying inspection tools and a helmet-mounted light as he moved carefully along a section of barnacle-crusted steel columns. The water was murky below 20 meters, shadows shifting across the rig's frame like long, ghostly fingers. Schools of trevally circled overhead, occasionally vanishing into the gloom. He floated in slow, measured motions using a handheld scraper to remove growth around a weld point. The job required full attention. The beams were slick and sharp in places, flanked by deep crevices that reached into darkness. Then it hit. Out of the depths, a force struck Liam with terrifying speed and weight. The blow hammered into his right side, sending his body spinning into one of the rig's supports. He didn't see it coming, just a sudden burst of motion and an impact like being tackled by a moving car. His regulator slipped from his mouth in the chaos and seawater surged into his mask. Blinded and choking, he struggled to reorient himself. His shoulders screamed in pain from the impact. His vision blurred as he reached for the regulator, barely managing to clamp it back between his teeth and flush out the water with a panicked breath. As he steadied himself, the world seemed to contract into a single, focused moment of survival. The great white shark circled back. It was massive, easily over 4 meters long, with a pale belly and slate-gray back that blended into the shadows. Its powerful tail moved in steady waves as it passed again, mouth slightly open, eyes black and unreadable. Then it lunged again, jaws opening wide. The rows of triangular teeth flashed just inches from Liam's face. One of them grazed his left arm, slicing through the thick neoprene sleeve of his suit and drawing a sudden sharp pain. Liam kicked with every ounce of strength he had, slamming his fins into the predator's snout and twisting away toward the nearest support beam. He gripped the slick metal, bracing himself as his heart pounded wildly in his chest. He couldn't see clearly, but he could feel the pressure, the threat, the knowledge that something ancient and built for killing was hunting in that silent water. His arm burned. The cut wasn't deep, but it throbbed with heat and fear. He waved his arm in the direction of his dive buddy's tether light, signaling emergency with fast, erratic motions. Above, the topside dive supervisor had already noticed irregular movement on the monitor. Seeing Liam's erratic signals and vital data spiking, they initiated an emergency retrieval. For long seconds that stretched into eternity, Liam clung to the steel column, scanning the shifting darkness. The shark was gone, vanished just as quickly as it had appeared. But the water around him felt charged, electric with threat. The tether pulled taut. His body lifted slowly through the murky water as air hissed through the surface supply line. He didn't relax, not even as the beams of sunlight began to reach him again. He kept looking down, waiting for that pale shape to return. Breaking the surface, Liam was hauled onto the rig's platform by two crew members who had already prepared a trauma station. His mask came off with a gasp as he sucked in the air, coughing and shaking. His face was pale, his hands trembling. He was helped out of the dive suit, revealing a long, bloody gash down his left arm. More superficial than expected, but still raw and pulsing. His shoulder had begun to swell from the impact of the initial strike, and bruises were already forming across his ribs. Medics treated the wounds while the dive team reviewed helmet cam footage. It confirmed what Liam already knew. A great white had approached from below, unseen, struck with explosive power, then circled back to investigate again. Experts later confirmed that it was likely a territorial or investigative response rather than predatory. Large sharks are known to explore objects with bumps or bites, and the reflection from Liam's tools or helmet light may have provoked the initial charge. The oil rig team suspended diving operations for the day. The support structure had always attracted marine life, fish, rays, even the occasional shark, but a direct encounter like this had never happened before in that sector. Liam was flown back to the mainland for scans and observation. Though his injuries were minor compared to what could have been, he struggled with what followed. Flashbacks haunted him at night, images of the wide-open mouth, the eyes, the weight of the impact. He didn't dive again for 6 months. When he finally returned to the water, it was in a pool with a therapy instructor. Open ocean dives returned slowly after that, and he never again descended without checking every shadow twice. That day, beneath the Centurion Alpha, changed his understanding of the job. It was a reminder that, no matter how strong the steel or precise the safety plan, humans were still fragile creatures in an alien world, one where survival sometimes hung by seconds and instincts prevailed. For Liam, the pain faded, the bruise healed, the scar on his arm thinned out, but the memory of the great white, the silent mass erupting from the void below, never left him. On December 28, 2019, Anya Petrova, a 28-year-old marine ecology graduate from Cape Town, visited the southern coast of Mozambique with two close friends to celebrate the end of the year. Adventurous and deeply passionate about the ocean, Anya had studied fish migration in university and spent most of her free time diving or snorkeling in warm waters across Africa. That morning, the group had spent several hours snorkeling just off the coast near a mangrove-lined inlet close to Inhaka Island. The weather was perfect: hot sun, still air, and slow-moving tide. The shallows were calm, and although the visibility was poor due to stirred-up silt and sediment, the trio had felt at ease, laughing as they followed small schools of fish weaving between the tree roots. Local fishermen they'd spoken with at breakfast had casually warned them about bull sharks in the area. These sharks, known for their unpredictable aggression and comfort in brackish water, often patrolled mangrove channels where visibility was low and prey was abundant. But like many travelers lulled by beauty and calm conditions, the group didn't take the warning seriously. They were young, fit, and used to being in the water. Around midday, the three friends decided to cool off again before lunch. They slipped into the water near the edge of the mangrove line, where the sandy bottom dropped off into a gradual slope. The current was soft but persistent, tugging gently toward the open channel. Anya swam slightly ahead of the others, exploring on her own with slow strokes. Her body relaxed in the lukewarm, cloudy water. The light above flickered through the thick canopy of roots. She floated above the shallow gradient just meters from the shifting line between green-brown sediment and deeper open water. Then came the splash, and a sudden violent surge of water just ahead of her friends made them freeze mid-stroke. They saw Anya's legs disappear beneath the surface with terrifying speed, her body yanked downward by something too fast and strong to be seen clearly. Red bloomed in the murky water as bubbles erupted and the churning foam turned pink, then crimson. Her scream barely escaped the surface before being swallowed by the chaos. One friend dove, catching only a flash, a pale leg, a tail thrashing through clouded water and a rising column of sand. They swam forward in desperation, searching through the turbulence. For seconds that stretched endlessly, all they saw was broken foam and blood, then silence. The shark had vanished into the deeper current, dragging Anya with it. Panic set in fast. The two friends screamed for help even though no one was close enough to hear. They swam back toward the beach, calling out and waving frantically at a small local boat that had just passed the inlet. The fishermen on board recognized the fear immediately. They turned around and sped toward the scene, helping their friends out of the water and radioing for assistance. Rescue boats arrived within the hour. Divers searched the area, using poles to probe through the deeper channel. Hours passed before her body was recovered, found more than 200 meters from where the attack occurred. Anya's lower leg had been severed. There were deep puncture wounds on her upper thigh and hip, suggesting a single, focused bite from a large bull shark, likely over 2.5 meters in length. The force of the initial strike had likely incapacitated her instantly, making escape impossible. Authorities reviewing the attack noted that her isolated position, distance from the group, and the murky water conditions may have contributed to the shark's reaction. In such low visibility, rapid movement near the mangrove's edge can easily be mistaken for prey. Bull sharks are one of the few species that tolerate both salt and fresh water, and they are known to patrol these estuaries aggressively, especially during feeding hours. The attack stunned the community. Though incidents with bull sharks in mangrove shallows weren't unheard of, fatalities were rare. Locals placed flower wreaths near the beach where Anya had last been seen, and the local authorities temporarily restricted access to the mangrove channels, urging all swimmers to stay clear of estuarine zones until further notice. Anya's family arrived from South Africa 2 days later to claim her body. Her parents, both environmental researchers, were devastated, but requested that no retaliation be taken against local shark populations. They understood better than most that the sea obeyed no human rules, that it moved by instinct, rhythm, and hunger. Anya had believed deeply in the beauty and power of the ocean. Her death, though violent and sudden, came in the waters she loved, among the mangroves she had studied from afar. Still, the brutality of it shook her friends and the diving community to its core. Her two friends didn't return to the water for months. The flash of her body disappearing beneath the surface replayed in their minds every night. They later shared their account with safety officials to improve future warning systems for tourists and snorkelers in high-risk areas. The beach where she was taken now carries a permanent sign. Warning: bull shark territory. Swim with caution. Danger lurks in the clear. For those who heard the story, it became more than a warning. It was a reminder that even on the most beautiful sunlit days, the ocean holds predators shaped by evolution, not malice, creatures that react in fractions of seconds to flickers and splashes. Anya had been a respectful visitor to their world, but even respect can't always prevent a fatal encounter. The sea gave no sign that morning, no fin, no shape, no warning ripple, just a blur beneath the surface, then a single splash, and the stillness that followed. On July 6, 2020, 17-year-old Kayla Mercer started her morning the same way she had every day that summer, by swimming laps just beyond the breakers in front of her family's beachfront home in Vero Beach, Florida. She had grown up with the Atlantic as her backyard and felt more comfortable in saltwater than on dry land. An athletic high school swimmer with college scholarships on the horizon, Kayla trained daily even during vacations, pushing herself to maintain speed and endurance under the summer sun. That morning the sea was unusually flat, as if the surface had been ironed smooth. No clouds interrupted the pale sky. The tide was rising gently, and schools of baitfish shimmered near the shoreline, catching the sunlight in flashes as they darted beneath the surface. Kayla entered the water shortly after 8 a.m., wearing a sleek black swimsuit and tinted goggles. She waded past the shore break and began her laps, counting strokes between breaths. The water was warm, the rhythm steady. She swam out to where the sea deepened just beyond the second sandbar, far enough that the pull of the ocean was strong but manageable. For 20 minutes, everything was calm. On shore, a few early beachgoers spread towels and umbrellas. A friend from the neighboring house waved from the dunes, watching her slice through the water like she always did, graceful, confident, in control. It was then that it struck. It felt like hitting a wall underwater. One moment she was gliding forward, and the next, a brutal jolt slammed into her lower leg, throwing off her stroke and spinning her body sideways. Pain erupted through her calf, sharp, hot, and immediate. She flailed, trying to stay upright as the burning sensation surged through her limb, her vision blurred. Instinctively, Kayla kicked hard with her uninjured leg and began paddling toward shore. The water around her turned cloudy, and with every kick, a fresh bloom of red rose beneath her. Her heart pounded in her chest, lungs heaving as panic joined the pain. On shore, a group of sunbathers heard the scream, a sudden high cry carried by the breeze, and turned to see her struggling in the surf, one leg leaving a red trail in the water. Her friend Max sprinted toward the sea and dove in. Kayla kept swimming, teeth clenched, every movement fueled by sheer adrenaline. The beach was still too far. Her injured leg grew heavier by the second. She felt dizzy, unsure whether it was blood loss or fear. Max reached her just before she collapsed into the shallow surf. He wrapped his arms around her chest and dragged her the last few feet onto the sand. Her leg left a streak behind it. She sobbed in pain as he shouted for help. The gash down her right calf was deep and clean, nearly 10 inches long, shaped in a smooth crescent. The bleeding was heavy, the skin pulled apart as if sliced by a blade. A bystander, a retired nurse, rushed over and immediately applied pressure with a towel while another dialed emergency services. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Kayla drifted in and out of focus, eyes glassy, lips pale. They stabilized her and rushed her to the nearest hospital, where trauma surgeons took over. The wound had narrowly missed tendons and major arteries. Stitches closed the torn flesh and a transfusion stabilized her. Marine biologists reviewing the case confirmed the bite pattern matched that of a juvenile hammerhead shark, likely drawn in by the dense schools of baitfish that had crowded the shoreline that morning. Hammerheads rarely bite humans, but their unpredictable turns and wide hunting sweeps in shallow water make them more prone to accidental strikes, especially when prey fish are plentiful. Kayla spent 2 nights in the hospital. She was lucky there was no permanent nerve damage, no muscle loss, no infection, but her return to the beach wasn't immediate. The mental scar cut deeper. For weeks, she couldn't walk near the water without flinching. Waves that once comforted her now sounded like threats. She kept dreaming about shadows rushing from below, jaws opening wide beneath the surface. Her mother installed a motion sensor light outside her bedroom, but it did little to quiet the pounding heart that kept her awake at night. Her swimming coaches encouraged her to return to the pool as part of her recovery. At first, even the quiet blue of chlorinated water made her breath catch. But eventually, stroke by stroke, she reclaimed a piece of the control she had lost. A month later, she stood at the edge of the beach again, surrounded by family. The sand was warm, the tide low. She didn't enter the water that day, but she watched it for a long time, scanning the surface. Kayla eventually returned to swimming in the ocean, but never alone, and never without watching for signs. Baitfish near shore, birds diving, or the telltale flicker of movement beneath the waves. She still bore a scar down her calf, pale and curved like a blade, a reminder that even in familiar places, danger could rise from below without a hint. That summer morning had started like so many others, peaceful, predictable, but the ocean had reminded her that it was not a swimming pool. It was wild, alive, and always waiting with secrets beneath the surface. On August 12, 2016, Nina van Dalen, a 35-year-old diving instructor from the Netherlands, joined a chartered dive off the coast of Pico Island, part of Portugal's remote Azores archipelago. With over a decade of experience leading open-water dives across Europe and Southeast Asia, she had grown accustomed to the unpredictable nature of the ocean. Still, nothing in her past dives had prepared her for what she would face that day. The dive plan was straightforward: explore a submerged volcanic ridge teeming with pelagic life and known for occasional shark sightings. The water was calm, the visibility was clear, and the conditions were ideal for a long dive. 8 divers, including Nina, descended into the depths of the blue, following their local guide down to a depth of 27 meters. Below the surface, the landscape was breathtaking. Sharp rock faces framed narrow valleys of soft coral, while amberjacks, barracuda, and fusiliers darted through shafts of sunlight. Nina swam near the rear of the group, occasionally stopping to study a nudibranch or photograph a passing school of fish. But as they moved farther from the island's rocky shelf and into deeper water, the current began to shift. What had started as a gentle push became a pulling force, swirling through the ridges with growing intensity. Divers adjusted their buoyancy to compensate, but the flow soon became erratic. Without warning, a cross-current hit Nina from the side, tugging her away from the reef wall. She kicked against it but felt herself drifting further and further from the group. Within seconds, their silhouettes blurred and vanished into the haze of deeper water. Alone and out of sight, Nina followed her training. She ascended slowly and carefully, checking her dive computer and breathing evenly. At 5 meters, she deployed her surface marker buoy, a bright orange tube designed to make divers visible from a distance. When she broke the surface, she saw nothing but an endless rolling ocean. Waves slapped her mask as she turned in all directions. No dive boat, no land in sight, just the wind and the rhythm of the Atlantic swells. She inflated her buoyancy vest to stay afloat and scanned the horizon. Then she noticed it, a long, narrow shape gliding beneath her, sleek and silent. A blue shark. Its streamlined body shimmered in the water, metallic blue along its back, paler underneath. It circled slowly, 5 meters below, its tail swaying with effortless rhythm. Nina had seen blue sharks before. Unlike more aggressive species, they were known for curiosity rather than confrontation. Yet she was alone now, adrift and bleeding adrenaline. The shark's presence, while initially mesmerizing, felt different this time, too close, too focused. At first, it kept its distance, looping wide circles beneath her. But with each pass, it edged closer. She held her limbs tight to her body, reducing her profile in the water. Panic remained just beneath the surface of her thoughts. But she fought to stay calm. The shark's next pass brought it just a meter away. Then it turned, rising gently toward her. Its snout touched her hip, not aggressively, but firmly enough to push her off balance. Nina steadied herself, adjusting her weight belt and inflating her vest slightly. She stayed as still as possible, her eyes locked on the shape fading again into deeper water. Another minute passed, then it returned, faster this time. It brushed her left thigh, then dropped again into the depths. The behavior had shifted. It wasn't just curious anymore, it was investigating. The third pass was a blur. The shark lunged upward and snapped at her fins, teeth grazing her ankle. The neoprene sliced cleanly open, and pain flared along the inside of her leg. She kicked instinctively, hard and fast, catching the shark's snout and forcing it to veer away. Blood clouded the water almost immediately. A thin stream curled around her leg and drifted into the current. She felt a warm pulse in her booty and knew she'd been cut, but training took over. Nina clamped her legs together to minimize motion and visibility of the injury. She held the safety sausage high, its orange fabric standing tall against the surface chop. Her heart pounded so loudly that it seemed to echo inside her mask. She floated, barely moving. Her eyes searched the blue beneath her for movement, but the shark was gone, vanished as suddenly as it had arrived. The water, once a lifeline, now felt like a vast trap. Minutes stretched like hours. She counted breaths, forced her muscles to remain still, and focused on the color of the sky, trying to keep fear from overwhelming her. Every shift of light below sent her pulse racing. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, she heard the low hum of an approaching engine. The dive boat had spotted her marker. The small vessel approached quickly, cutting through the chop. 2 crew members leaned over the side, reaching for her. They hauled her up onto the deck where she collapsed, shivering despite the warm air. Her leg bled through the torn suit, but the wound was shallow, more a warning than a mauling. Back on shore, a local doctor stitched the crescent-shaped cut and confirmed no deep damage had occurred. She had lost some blood, but it was nothing life-threatening. Still, her face remained pale, her hands shaking long after she was cleaned and bandaged. Marine biologists later reviewed her description and confirmed the shark's behavior matched that of a blue shark performing a bump and bite test, often a method to evaluate unfamiliar objects. In the open ocean, especially with solitary divers, even a non-aggressive shark might misread signals or grow emboldened. Nina had survived the encounter with composure and luck, but she never dove solo again. From that point forward, she took extra precautions, redundant gear, double signaling equipment, and mandatory surface watch on every deep dive. She returned to the sea weeks later, not because she was fearless, but because she refused to let fear erase her love for the ocean. Yet something had changed in her. Where once there had been only awe, there now lived respect edged with caution. That day off the Azores reminded her that the ocean was not only beautiful, but indifferent. It did not care how skilled you were, how experienced, how prepared. It moved according to ancient rhythms, governed by creatures that had survived eons by testing, bumping, and biting. In open water, far from land, floating alone beneath an endless sky, Nina had learned what it meant to be prey, even just for a moment, and that moment stayed with her forever.